This piece is called The Cousins. At our first meeting in baggage claim at the Minneapolis airport 10 years ago, I couldn't believe that the two black-haired princesses in fur-trimmed coats standing by Carousel 3 were actually my 9-year-old cousins. They looked nothing like brown, frizzy-mopped, freckled me. "You must be Sophie," said one of the girls in an almost British accent. She introduced herself as Esther. Rachel was her identical twin. They each blew cool air kisses on both of my cheeks. With them was a tall man who shook my hand in his leather-gloved one. My dad said this was his brother, Uncle Mickey. The cousins brought their pink and white polka-dot backpacks to our house and unloaded strange treasures onto my bedroom rug. Books too complicated for my 7-year-old brain, candy skulls that oozed juice from their eye sockets, and dolls named Rachel and Esther, mini-me versions of my cousins. One doll wore a white satin dress, the other a gown of silver. Both came with crowns because they were biblical heroines. The cousins' outfits matched their dolls. So much explaining went on that day that I got dizzy and almost threw up. I learned what a Bible was, a book about Jews, including Jewish heroines, why I'd never met my cousins before. Uncle Mickey was mad at my dad for not being Jewish enough. My dad reciprocated by refusing to see him. And why they never came to visit. 2 planes ran into the World Trade Center, which caused Uncle Mickey and my dad to declare that life was too short to not see their only brother. At dinner that night, I made the mistake of asking my mom if I could order a Jewish heroine doll that looked like me. Sophie, she said, was not the name of a Jewish heroine. Rachel and Esther giggled into their napkins. In my bedroom after dinner, I told the cousins they'd come to the right place for twins. Minneapolis and St. Paul were the twin cities. Rachel said Uncle Mickey called the cities a cow town. "We don't have cows here, except during state fair." What's a state fair?" Rachel asked. I described the animal barns, giant vegetable contests, and delicious food on a stick. "But it's not on TV like the Macy's parade," said Esther. The cousins convinced me that nothing about Minneapolis was as famous or important as the Macy's parade. Uncle Mickey was right. I lived in a cowless cow town that also lacked Central Park, FAO Schwartz, and a major terrorist attack that left a smoking hole. Worst of all, Minneapolis and St. Paul had no Broadway. Uncle Mickey was a stockbroker who knew lots of Broadway people. That year, he got the cousins $400 seats to watch a musical called Urinetown. "That's urine as in pee," said Esther. "It was edgy." The poor actors. I imagined a theater loaded with razor-sharp laughter. Less dangerous was the cousins' interest in dance. I'd seen the Nutcracker. Ballet was soft, all silky moves and fluffy costumes. "We performed in the Nutcracker," said Rachel. She hummed the Waltz of the Flowers, which prompted Esther to lift the skirt of her silver dress and twirl and skip around my bedroom on black knit exclamation point legs. I asked them to teach me to dance too. According to them, I was too fat. When the cousins left, I hoped to never see them again. But that was not to be. Early the next spring, Uncle Mickey sent us airplane tickets to Manhattan to celebrate Passover, a Jewish holiday I'd never heard of before. Not a religious holiday, my mother explained, but a family thing. When we stepped inside Uncle Mickey's townhouse on 86th Street, I was amazed at how a building so skinny on the outside could be so much bigger than our condo in Seward. Uncle Mickey, too, towered over my father when they hugged each other. Then began another weekend of dizzying explanations. How my dad and uncle grew up in Queens in a teeny apartment, like an ice house, said my dad. How my late grandparents sometimes couldn't pay heat bills. That was why Uncle Mickey's house had fireplaces on all 3 floors. And how Jews were slaves in ancient Egypt. Never again, said Aunt Miriam, whose housekeeper was Catholic. Most surprising of all, was that my father could pronounce the Hebrew words in the Passover book that everyone read out loud. During the Hebrew prayers and songs, my mother stayed quiet. "Your father was brought up religious," she said when she tucked me in that night in Uncle Mickey's guest room. "Does that mean he's more Jewish than you and me?" My mother said, "No. Jewish roots follow the mother's bloodline. I imagined the women in my family as astronauts floating in space, attached to the same red breathing tube." "Then why aren't I a biblical heroine?" She promised to explain secular when I got older. The next morning, I sat in Rachel's bedroom on her yellow canopied bed while the cousins paraded out their Hanukkah gifts from the year before: sparkly barrettes, velvet dresses, a new Xbox, the latest version of The Sims, then played songs from their February birthday trip to the Broadway musical Mamma Mia. "There's a character in it named Sophie," said Rachel. "She doesn't know who her father is." "Are you sure you know who your father is?" Esther asked. Surely this was a joke. I laughed. Then something wet and spongy wriggled inside my shirt collar and slid down my back. I frantically flapped my shirt and screamed. A matzo ball fell to the floor. "Why?" I asked the cousins, digging my fingernails into my thumbs to keep from crying. They promised to give me their Jewish heroine dolls if I didn't tell on them. I took the dolls. The next Passover, the cousins invited me to Central Park before the Seder. We walked to an ice-covered pond called Turtle. No one else was there. "Let's go in," Esther suggested. "Awesome," said Rachel. "No way," I responded. Only an idiot would walk into a frozen pond in March. So they hooked my arms through theirs and pulled me in. With each step, our feet broke the ice and plunged us into chilly water. The cousins shrieked and giggled. "Don't you feel so alive?" said Esther. She smiled at me. Rachel touched one cold, smooth cheek to mine. "Can we tell our parents that this was your idea?" Our three bodies pressed close together created a numbing warmth. I told the cousins yes. That day, none of the adults yelled at me, but back in Minneapolis, I was grounded for a week. The year after that, the cousins refused to talk to me unless I ran my hands over the rough wood moldings in the laundry room. They wanted to practice taking out splinters. "Our mitzvah for the day," said Rachel, who said mitzvot, or good deeds, were all the teacher talked about in Hebrew school. Uncle Mickey, too. He was working for a company that took care of rich people's good deed money. I said yes, and left New York with scab-covered palms that pussed with infection. Never, I vowed, would I ever say yes to the cousins again.